Hey there, everyone. Welcome to my channel, where we dive deep into the spine-chilling world of horror stories. I'm so glad you're here with me. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just looking to get a little spooked, I've got some terrifying tales lined up that will keep you on the edge of your seat. My name is Mike Talbot, and at 35 years old, I've spent over a decade as a park ranger in the sprawling wilderness of Blackwood National Forest. I love my job. Every day is a new adventure amid towering pines and serene lakes. I've always felt a connection to nature, finding solace in the whispering leaves and the calls of distant birds. However, my peaceful existence took a dark turn when I started to hear tales of the creature lurking in the shadows, tales that would soon become more than mere folklore. It all began in late October, as the vibrant autumn leaves began their slow descent into decay. The park was preparing for the influx of visitors that would come to witness the fiery hues of fall. I was stationed at the entrance, checking permits and offering recommendations for the best hiking trails. My partner Carl, an old-timer with a penchant for tall tales, had recently been spinning stories about a creature that haunted these woods, a beast he called the Dogman. "Old legends, Mike," he would say, his voice a gravely whisper. "They say he walks on two legs and has the face of a dog. You ever see him, you best turn around and run. You won't get a second chance." I chuckled it off. Sure, there are myths in every forest, but I'd never seen anything more alarming than a curious raccoon or a lost deer. Still, Carl's stories lingered in the back of my mind, creeping into my thoughts like the fading light of dusk. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, I decided to take a walk along one of the less traveled trails. The air was crisp, and the forest felt alive with the rustle of leaves. I was captivated by the beauty around me, momentarily forgetting Carl's chilling tales. As I walked deeper into the woods, I noticed a sudden stillness. The usual chirps and rustles had vanished, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. Then I saw it. A fleeting shadow darted between the trees, something large and low to the ground. My heart raced. I dismissed it as a trick of the fading light, but unease settled in my stomach. I pressed on, the back of my neck prickling with awareness. Days passed, and I continued my routine, but the memory of that shadow lingered. I spoke to Carl about it, hoping for reassurance. Instead, he leaned closer, his eyes narrowing with concern. "Mike, if you see something you can't explain, don't confront it. Just remember what I said, run." Despite his warning, I felt a growing curiosity. One night, while preparing for my shift, I heard the distant howl of a wolf, but there was something off about it. It sounded too close, too human-like. I shook my head, attributing it to the imagination of a man spending too much time alone in the woods. The following week, I volunteered for night patrol, hoping to clear my mind. The full moon cast an ethereal glow across the forest, illuminating the path ahead. The tranquility of the night was comforting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves sent my heart racing. As I made my rounds, I noticed a set of enormous tracks leading off the main path. They were far too large to belong to any animal I was familiar with. My curiosity piqued. I decided to follow them. The tracks wove deeper into the underbrush, and with each step, the air grew heavier, thick with a sense of foreboding. After what felt like hours, I found myself at the edge of a clearing. The moonlight illuminated a small pond, its surface perfectly still. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard it. A low growl reverberated through the air, sending chills down my spine. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but a part of me was frozen, compelled to look deeper into the darkness. Then I saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, standing on two legs, its muscular frame cloaked in a thick coat of dark fur. Its face, undeniably canine, bore eyes that glinted with an unnatural intelligence. Time seemed to freeze as I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, paralyzed by fear and awe. It let out another low growl, but it didn't approach. Instead, it seemed to assess me, its gaze piercing through the night. Every instinct told me to flee, yet I remained rooted to the spot, entranced by the creature before me. I had heard about the Dogman, but I never thought it could be real. Just as quickly as it had appeared, the creature turned and vanished into the woods, melting into the shadows. I was left standing in the clearing, breathless and bewildered. I stumbled back to my truck, heart racing, questioning everything I thought I knew about the forest. The following days were a blur. I wrestled with what I had seen. Had I really witnessed the dogman, or was my mind playing tricks on me? I confided in Carl, who listened intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to grave concern. "Mike, you've seen something you shouldn't have," he said slowly. "That creature isn't something you can rationalize. It's a guardian of the woods, a sentinel of things that lie beyond our understanding." I spent the next week trying to dismiss the encounter as a hallucination brought on by fatigue, but the sense of dread only grew stronger. I was plagued by nightmares, visions of that haunting face lurking just beyond the tree line, always watching, always waiting. Each time I closed my eyes, I could hear its growl, a chilling reminder of my folly. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to return to the clearing. Maybe confronting my fear would help put my mind at ease. Armed with a flashlight and my trusty old camping knife, I ventured back into the depths of Blackwood National Forest. The moon hung high in the sky, casting long shadows that danced around me. As I approached the clearing, I felt a deep unease settle in my bones. I took a deep breath, fighting against the rising tide of panic, and stepped into the open space. The pond glimmered under the moonlight, but the atmosphere felt charged, as if the air was thick with tension. I waited, straining to hear anything beyond the rustle of leaves. Time seemed to stretch, each second crawling by. Just when I thought I'd lost my nerve, I heard it, a low growl resonating from the shadows. My heart raced as I turned the beam of my flashlight towards the sound. The creature stood there once more, closer than before. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, reflecting the moon like twin lanterns in the dark. I felt the primal urge to run, to escape this nightmare, but something held me in place. I was frozen, caught between fear and a morbid fascination. Suddenly, the growl morphed into a deep, resonating sound that echoed through the trees, sending a shock of terror through me. I could feel its presence, an ancient being steeped in the wildness of the forest. Then, it stepped forward, and for the briefest moment, our eyes locked. I felt a wave of understanding wash over me, a sense of ancient wisdom mingled with an unyielding warning. With an instinctive rush, I turned and ran. I sprinted through the trees, branches clawing at my clothes, heart pounding in my ears. I burst out of the woods and into the parking area, collapsing against my truck, gasping for breath. The creature had vanished into the night, but its presence lingered in the air, a lingering threat that refused to dissipate. In the days that followed, I wrestled with my sanity. I found it harder to focus on my duties, haunted by the memory of the dogman. I began to question everything, my perceptions, my experiences, even my role as a park ranger. Was I meant to protect this forest, or had I been warned to stay away from its depths? As I sat alone in my cabin one evening, I stared out into the darkness beyond the tree line. The wind howled, and the branches creaked ominously, as if the forest itself were whispering secrets. What was I truly witnessing? Could it be that I had stepped into a realm beyond human understanding, a place where ancient forces roamed, where the very essence of nature entwined with myth? The thought sent shivers down my spine. I had always prided myself on being rational, grounded in reality, but now I found myself questioning everything I believed. I had encountered something real, something that defied logic. And with that realization came a new kind of fear, the fear of the unknown. The dogman was not just a creature, it was a symbol of the wildness of nature, of the things we cannot tame or fully comprehend. It represented the boundary between the human world and the mysteries that lay beyond. As the days turned into weeks, I grappled with the decision to stay in Blackwood National Forest. The forest that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison. I longed to return to the depths of the wilderness, to confront my fears, yet the memory of those glowing eyes haunted my every thought. And so I find myself here, standing on the precipice of understanding. I've come to realize that the true terror lies not in the creature itself, but in the realization that some things are better left unexamined. The dogman is not just a legend, it's a guardian, a reminder of the wildness that exists beyond the veil of civilization. I often ponder the question, what if the dogman was not a threat, but a keeper? I often ponder the question, What if the dogman was not a threat, but a keeper of the forest, a guardian of the ancient secrets hidden among the trees? Perhaps it exists to remind us of our place within the natural world, a world that we too often take for granted, a world that thrives on its mysteries and its untamed beauty. Each day, I return to my duties, patrolling the trails, maintaining the campgrounds, and greeting visitors with a practiced smile. Yet, my heart is not in it the way it used to be. The laughter of families and the chatter of hikers now feels hollow against the backdrop of what I have witnessed. I can't shake the feeling that there's a barrier between me and the rest of humanity, a distance that grows each time I think of that night in the clearing. One evening, as I sat outside my cabin, the sun dipping below the horizon, I spotted a group of hikers approaching. They were full of life, eager to share their stories of adventure and exploration. I forced myself to join in, putting on the mask of the cheerful ranger, but inside I felt a storm brewing. They spoke of encounters with deer, bears, and the occasional mountain lion, and I found myself holding back the urge to warn them about the true creature of the woods. "Have you ever seen anything unusual out there?" one of the hikers asked, curiosity glinting in her eyes. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. Should I share my experience, risk being labeled as a madman, or keep the truth buried, safeguarding them from the shadows? "Just the usual wildlife," I replied, forcing a smile. "It's a beautiful place out here, but it's wise to respect the woods." The hikers nodded, unaware of the deeper truths I had come to understand. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the familiar howl, the sound I had once dismissed as a trick of the imagination. But now it resonated with a chilling clarity. It was close, much closer than before. I bolted upright, heart racing, as the memories flooded back. The glowing eyes, the presence that had filled the clearing with dread and awe. I grabbed my flashlight, unable to resist the pull of curiosity. I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my skin. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the forest, illuminating the path I had taken so many times before. With each step, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. The clearing was quiet, but as I approached the pond, I noticed the tracks again. Massive paw prints, deeper and more defined than before. They led away from the water, disappearing into the dense underbrush. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to turn back, but the need for answers drove me forward. I followed the trail, heart pounding in my chest. The forest seemed to come alive around me, shadows shifting and rustling in the moonlight. Just when I thought I would lose my nerve, I heard it, the low growl again, echoing through the trees. There it was, the dogman, standing at the edge of the clearing, as if it had been waiting for me. This time, it was closer, its massive frame outlined against the moonlight. I felt a surge of terror, but also an inexplicable sense of connection. It didn't growl this time. Instead, it tilted its head, as if trying to understand me as much as I was trying to understand it. I took a step forward, feeling a strange compulsion to approach it. But as I did, the creature took a step back, its eyes never leaving mine. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small token, a carved wooden wolf I had kept for years. It had been a gift from my grandmother, a reminder of my bond with nature. I held it out as an offering, a silent plea for understanding. The dogman paused, its gaze flicking to the token before returning to me. The growl faded, replaced by a heavy silence. In that moment, I felt a profound connection, as if the boundaries between us had blurred. It was a moment of recognition, two beings from different worlds, caught in a web of fate. But then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the creature turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving me standing alone in the clearing. The weight of its presence lingered in the air, and I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: fear, awe, and an undeniable sense of loss. As the days turned into weeks, I grappled with what had happened. I felt compelled to return to the clearing, to search for answers, yet each time I did, the dogman was nowhere to be found. It was as if it had vanished, leaving only a whisper of its existence behind. I began to question the very fabric of my reality. Had I truly encountered a creature from legend, or had the isolation of my job twisted my mind? Friends and colleagues began to notice my unease, my distracted demeanor. I became a shadow of the man I once was, haunted by the experience that had changed everything. Eventually, I decided to speak to Carl again, hoping for clarity. I found him at his usual spot, leaning against a weathered tree, a knowing look in his eyes. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he asked, his voice steady. I nodded, the weight of my experience crashing over me once more. "What does it want? Why did it show itself to me?" Carl's gaze turned serious. "The dogman is a guardian. It reveals itself to those who are meant to see it. Maybe it's showing you something about yourself, about the forest. It's not about fear, Mike. It's about understanding." His words resonated deep within me, planting seeds of hope amidst the turmoil. Perhaps this creature was a part of the forest, a protector of its mysteries, and I was meant to find my place within it. But with each passing day, I found myself increasingly at odds with my surroundings. I felt drawn to the wilderness, yet terrified of what it might reveal. I longed to confront the dogman again, to seek answers, but the fear of what I might discover kept me rooted in doubt. And so, as I sit here now, pen in hand, I find myself questioning everything I thought I knew. What is the nature of the dogman? Is it a manifestation of fear or a symbol of wisdom? Am I truly meant to be a part of this wild world, or am I simply an intruder in a realm that I can never fully understand? The forest has many secrets, and I know I am only beginning to scratch the surface. The dogman watches from the shadows, a sentinel of the untamed, a keeper of truths that elude human comprehension. In the end, I am left with more questions than answers. What does it mean to witness something so profound and terrifying? Will I ever find my way back to the peaceful ranger I once was, or have I crossed a threshold that can never be uncrossed? As I ponder these questions, I feel the weight of the forest pressing in around me, a reminder that the wilderness will always hold its secrets close. I am but a fleeting figure among the ancient trees, a man grappling with the shadows of his own understanding. And perhaps, in the quiet moments between the howls of the night, I will find my answer, deep in the heart of Blackwood National Forest, where the line between man and myth blurs, and the true nature of the dogman awaits. My name is Jake Mercer, and I'm a park ranger in the sprawling, untamed wilderness of Pine Hollow National Park. At 32, I can confidently say I've found my calling among the towering trees and the whispering winds. I love my job because it allows me to connect with nature in a way few ever experience. Each day, I'm greeted by the soft rustle of leaves, the distant calls of wildlife, and the serene beauty of untouched landscapes. It's a life of adventure, solitude, and a deep-rooted sense of purpose. I cherish the responsibility of protecting this vibrant ecosystem, sharing its wonders with visitors, and ensuring that the majesty of the natural world remains undisturbed. But beneath the tranquility lies a darkness that has seeped into my heart. A few months ago, I began hearing hushed whispers from the locals about a creature that prowls the forest at night, a being they called the dogman. I brushed off the tales as mere folklore, stories spun to entertain and frighten, until one fateful evening when I stumbled upon something I could no longer ignore. It was late September, and the forest was ablaze with the colors of autumn. I had just finished my shift and decided to take a long walk along one of the less traveled trails, hoping to clear my mind. As I meandered through the dappled light, I felt a profound sense of peace. The earthy scent of pine needles and damp soil enveloped me, and for a moment, I forgot about the strange stories circulating in town, but that peace was short-lived. As I ventured deeper into the woods, a thick fog rolled in, cloaking the trees in an eerie veil. Suddenly, an unsettling silence fell over the forest, the chirping of birds and rustling of small animals replaced by an oppressive stillness. A shiver crawled down my spine, and I paused, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Then I saw it, a flash of movement in my peripheral vision. My heart raced as I turned, but there was nothing there, just the undulating fog wrapping around the trees. Dismissing it as my imagination, I pressed on, but the sense of being watched lingered, heavy in the air. I quickened my pace, eager to return to the familiarity of my cabin. That night, I lay in bed, haunted by the thought of what I'd seen. Had it been an animal or something more? My dreams were plagued by visions of a tall, shadowy figure, its eyes glinting with an otherworldly light. I woke in a cold sweat, heart pounding and decided I needed to put the rumors to rest. I resolved to investigate the stories of the dogman. The following week, I spoke to some locals at the general store, hoping to gather more information. They exchanged knowing glances, their expressions shifting from amusement to unease as I inquired. Old Man Harris, a grizzled veteran of the woods, leaned in closer. "You're not the first ranger to ask about it," he said, his voice low. "They say he's been around for years, but no one's ever managed to catch a glimpse of him. At least, not they, and lived to tell the tale." A chill ran through me as he recounted sightings of a creature that walked upright, covered in dark fur, with the head of a dog. "If you see him, you best turn tail and run," he warned, his eyes wide. "He's a guardian of the forest, but he doesn't take kindly to intruders." I laughed it off, but doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. Was I truly prepared to confront a creature steeped in local legend? That night, I made a decision. I would spend a night in the depths of the forest, hoping to see the dogman for myself. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. Equipped with my flashlight, a sleeping bag, and a sturdy camping knife, I ventured back into the woods. As darkness fell, I settled into a clearing near the pond where I had first seen that flash of movement. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could hear the distant rustle of leaves, the occasional snap of twigs underfoot. As the moon rose high in the sky, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I knew I was not alone. Every crack and whisper in the night heightened my senses, and I began to question my decision. The forest, which had always felt like home, now felt alien and ominous. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound was deep, primal, unlike anything I had ever heard. The growl grew louder, resonating through the air, and I felt an urge to flee, but a part of me wanted to stand my ground. Then I saw it, a massive figure emerging from the shadows, illuminated by the moonlight. The dogman stood before me, towering and muscular, its eyes gleaming like shards of glass. It regarded me with an intensity that sent a wave of fear crashing over me. I was paralyzed, caught between terror and an overwhelming sense of awe. As I stumbled backward, my instincts screamed for me to run. I turned and sprinted through the underbrush, branches tearing at my clothes as I barreled down the trail. The growl echoed behind me, growing fainter as I pushed myself harder. I burst through the tree line and into the safety of my cabin, slamming the door behind me. That night, I lay wide awake, replaying the encounter in my mind. Had I truly seen the dogman, or had my fear conjured an illusion? The once familiar sounds of the forest now felt menacing, each creak and rustle a reminder of the creature that had haunted my dreams. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself that I had imagined the entire encounter, but the memory lingered like a specter. My colleagues noticed my distraction, my unease growing palpable. I confided in one of the newer rangers, Sarah, who listened with an understanding gaze. "I believe you, Jake," she said softly. "The forest has its secrets. Just because we can't explain it doesn't mean it's not real." Her words resonated with me, but they also filled me with a sense of dread. If the dogman was real, what did that mean for me and my role in the park? I had always felt a connection to nature, but now I found myself questioning everything I knew. Determined to uncover the truth, I returned to the clearing one more time, this time during the day. I searched for any signs of the creature, tracks, hair, anything that could confirm my experience. Hours passed as I combed the area, but there was no evidence, only the tranquil beauty of the forest that felt so at odds with my fear. As dusk began to settle, I reluctantly turned to head back. Just then, I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye. A shadow flitted between the trees, and my heart raced. I felt an almost magnetic pull to follow it, but instinctively, I knew it was a mistake. The forest grew darker, and I hesitated, fear wrapping around me like a cloak. I stood at the edge of the trees, torn between the need to confront the truth and the instinct to retreat. But the thrill of the unknown urged me forward, deeper into the woods. As I stepped into the darkness, the familiar sounds of the forest fell away. I followed the shadow, heart racing, until I found myself at the pond again. The moonlight cast a silvery sheen across the water, and I felt an undeniable energy in the air. Then, the dogman emerged from the shadows once more. standing at the water's edge. This time, it was different. The creature didn't growl or show aggression. Instead, it simply watched me, its eyes reflecting the light like glowing embers. I felt a strange calm wash over me, as if the forest had drawn us together for a reason. I took a hesitant step forward, my voice trembling. "Why are you here?" To my astonishment, the dogman tilted its head, a gesture that felt almost curious. It didn't approach, but it didn't flee either. For a moment, we existed in a shared space, caught between the human world and something ancient, something primal. And then it turned and vanished into the woods, leaving me standing alone at the water's edge, breathless and bewildered. I felt as if I had crossed some invisible threshold, caught between fear and understanding. In the days that followed, I continued my duties, but my perspective had shifted. I was no longer just a protector of the forest. I felt a part of something larger, something that transcended human understanding. The dogman was no longer a threat, but a reminder of the wildness that existed within and around me. I still question what I witnessed that night. Was the dogman a guardian, a keeper of the forest's secrets, or was it a manifestation of the untamed aspects of nature that we often overlook? Now, as I sit on my porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I find peace in the uncertainty. The wilderness is filled with shadows and mysteries, but it is also a place of beauty and wonder. And as I continue my work in Pine Hollow, I carry the memory of the dogman with me, a guardian of the forest, a reminder that there are things in this world that we may never fully understand. In the end, it's that very mystery that makes my job so profoundly rewarding. I am merely a visitor in this realm, a steward of the wild, and perhaps that is enough. I embrace the shadows, knowing they hold secrets worth exploring, and the dogman watches over them, a silent sentinel of the untamed. My name is Alex Turner, and I've dedicated the last 8 years of my life to working as a park ranger in the vast expanse of a national park. At 30, I can't imagine a more fulfilling job. There's something magical about waking up to the sound of birds singing and the fresh scent of pine needles mingling with morning dew. Each day is a new adventure, filled with the thrill of discovering hidden trails, observing wildlife in their natural habitat, and sharing the breathtaking beauty of nature with visitors. I feel a deep sense of purpose as I protect this pristine wilderness and ensure that future generations can experience its wonders. But as much as I cherish my work, there's an undercurrent of unease that has recently gripped my heart, a dark thread woven into the fabric of the park's serene beauty. Whispers of a creature known as the dogman have spread like wildfire among locals and seasoned hikers alike. I initially dismissed these tales as mere folklore, stories designed to spook the curious and adventurous. But as I delved deeper into the lore of Whispering Pines, I began to wonder if there might be some truth to the terrifying legend. It started with a chance encounter during a routine patrol. One afternoon, I was checking the eastern trails when I stumbled upon a small group of hikers gathered around a campfire. They looked up at me, eager to share their experiences, but their conversation quickly took a dark turn. "Have you heard about the dogman?" one of the hikers asked, a mix of excitement and fear in his eyes. "They say he roams these woods at night, watching, waiting. Some even say he's a protector, but others, well, they don't come back." I chuckled nervously, trying to dismiss the tension that had crept into the air. "Just local stories to scare the tourists," I replied, forcing a smile. But even as I spoke, the seeds of doubt were planted in my mind. The weeks that followed were marked by strange occurrences. Other rangers began sharing their own unsettling encounters, shadows flitting between trees, eerie howls echoing through the night, and the sudden silence of the forest when the dogman was near. I found myself on edge, second-guessing every rustle in the underbrush. Yet, despite the growing unease, my love for the forest compelled me to confront the fear head-on. One crisp October evening, I decided to spend the night camping alone at one of the more remote locations in the park. My plan was to observe the night sky, but I also wanted to confront the tales that had been swirling in my mind. Armed with a flashlight, a sleeping bag, and my trusty knife, I set up camp in a secluded clearing surrounded by ancient trees. As dusk descended, the forest transformed. Shadows lengthened, and the air grew thick with anticipation. I could hear the distant calls of owls and the rustle of leaves, but beneath that familiar symphony lay an unsettling stillness. It felt as though the woods were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Night enveloped the clearing, and I lay on my back, staring up at the stars. The vastness of the universe was mesmerizing, a reminder of how small I was in the grand scheme of things. Yet, as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My heart raced as I glanced around, half expecting to see the dogman lurking just beyond the trees. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl that echoed through the darkness, chilling me to my core. The sound resonated in my bones, primal and threatening. I sat up quickly, scanning the tree line with my flashlight, the beam cutting through the inky blackness. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice wavering. There was no response, only the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. The growl came again, closer this time, and I felt an instinctual urge to flee. Before I could think, I grabbed my gear and bolted toward the path leading back to my truck. Panic surged through me as I stumbled over roots and rocks, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was terrified, yet a part of me felt exhilarated, caught between the thrill of the unknown and the instinct to survive. Suddenly, I saw a shadow darting between the trees, impossibly fast. My heart raced as I caught a glimpse of the creature, tall and sinewy, with a canine head and piercing eyes that glowed like embers in the dark. It was gone in an instant, leaving only a chilling silence in its wake. I pushed harder, adrenaline fueling my escape. As I reached my truck, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. I finally got the door open and jumped inside, locking it with a shaky breath. I sat there for a long moment, heart pounding, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Had I truly seen the dogman, or was it a trick of the light? The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on me. The following days were a blur of dread and fascination. I couldn't shake the image of that creature from my mind. I threw myself into my work, trying to drown out the fear, but it lingered like a dark cloud. I shared my experience with a fellow ranger, Lisa, who listened with wide eyes. "I've heard the stories too," she admitted, her voice low. "Some say the dogman is a guardian, a protector of the forest. Others think it's something far more sinister. Either way, you're not alone in your encounter." Her words resonated with me. The idea that the dogman could be a protector intrigued me, but it also filled me with dread. Why would a guardian choose to reveal itself in such a terrifying way? I began to wonder if I was meant to confront this being, to seek understanding instead of fleeing in fear. Determined to uncover the truth, I organized an overnight expedition with a small group of fellow rangers. We chose a location near the clearing where I had first encountered the creature, hoping to witness something together. As we set up camp, a mix of excitement and apprehension filled the air. Night fell, and we gathered around the campfire, swapping stories and laughing nervously. But as the hours passed, the laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy tension. The forest grew quiet, the usual sounds of rustling leaves and distant animals falling into a heavy silence. "Do you feel that?" Lisa whispered, glancing around. The air felt charged, electric, as if something were brewing just beyond the trees. I nodded, heart racing. I felt it before, right before I saw him. Just then, a low growl echoed through the night, sending shivers down my spine. The sound was haunting, echoing through the stillness of the woods. We all turned our heads toward the source, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. "Stay together," I instructed, though I felt a deep-seated fear creeping in. We huddled close, each of us scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Moments later, I spotted it, a massive silhouette lurking at the edge of the clearing. My breath caught in my throat as I locked eyes with the dogman. Its gaze was intense, reflecting the firelight in a way that felt almost sentient. It stood tall, muscles rippling beneath its thick coat of fur. Fear gripped me, but there was also a strange sense of connection. The creature didn't approach, nor did it growl again. Instead, it watched us, as if assessing our intentions. The stillness stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Then, without warning, the dogman turned and disappeared into the depths of the forest. My heart raced as I glanced at my companions, their faces pale with shock. "What do we do now?" one of them whispered, voice trembling. "We wait," I replied, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. We had come to seek the truth, and now we had a glimpse of it. But deep down, I felt a new sense of responsibility. I needed to understand this creature, to find a way to coexist with the wilderness that both fascinated and terrified me. As the night wore on, the tension in the air began to dissipate, replaced by an almost reverent silence. We shared our thoughts, processing what we had witnessed. Lisa spoke of the legends she had heard, stories of the dogman as a protector, a spirit of the forest that kept watch over the land. "It's not just a monster," she said. "It's a part of this place, just like we are." Her words resonated with me, and I felt a shift in my understanding. The dogman was not just a creature of fear. It was a guardian, an embodiment of the wilderness itself. But what did that mean for me as a ranger? How could I protect this forest while acknowledging the presence of something so enigmatic? In the weeks that followed, I returned to the clearing often, hoping to encounter the dogman again. I brought offerings, small trinkets, tokens of appreciation for the forest that had given me so much. Each time, I felt the weight of its gaze upon me, a silent acknowledgement of our connection. One fateful night, as I set up camp once more, the atmosphere felt different. The air was charged with anticipation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be significant. As darkness fell, I lit a small fire and sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the forest. Hours passed, and just when I thought I would be disappointed, I heard it, the unmistakable growl reverberating through the night. My heart raced, and I felt a surge of excitement and fear. The dogman emerged from the shadows, a majestic silhouette framed by the moonlight. This time, it didn't retreat. It approached slowly, cautiously, as if testing my resolve. I sat still, holding my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature came closer, its eyes locking onto mine, and I felt an overwhelming sense of calm wash over me. "Why are you here?" I whispered, unsure if it could understand me. "What do you want?" To my surprise, the dogman tilted its head, a gesture that felt almost inquisitive. It stepped forward, closer to the firelight, revealing the powerful muscles beneath its thick fur. I felt a rush of emotions, fear, awe, and an undeniable connection to the wildness of this being. In that moment, I understood. The dogman was not merely a creature of folklore. It was a guardian of the forest, a being that existed beyond the boundaries of human understanding. And I was a part of this world, a steward of the land, tasked with protecting it alongside this enigmatic creature. As the night wore on, we remained locked in our silent exchange, an unspoken understanding passing between us. It was a moment of communion, bridging the gap between human and nature. I realized that my role as a ranger was not just about protecting the land. It was about learning to coexist with the mysteries that lay within it. When dawn broke, the dogman turned and vanished into the trees, leaving me with a sense of fulfillment I had never felt before. I knew that my life would never be the same. I had glimpsed a world beyond the ordinary, a realm filled with wonder and secrets that challenged my understanding of nature. As I returned to my duties, I carried the memory of the dogman with me, a reminder of the interconnectedness of all living things. I continued to share my love for the forest with visitors, but now I also spoke of the mysteries that lay hidden among the trees, stories of a guardian that watched over whispering pines, a being that was both fearsome and beautiful. In the end, I had come to embrace the unknown. The dogman remained a shadow in the depths of the forest, a reminder of the wildness that lay within us all. And as I stood on the edge of the clearing, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that I was not alone in my journey. The wilderness, with all its shadows and mysteries, was my home, and I would continue to protect it with reverence and respect. My name is Harold Jenkins, and at 72, I've spent the better part of my life in this weathered cabin nestled deep within the heart of forest. The trees stand like ancient sentinels, their gnarled branches whispering secrets in the wind, and the air is thick with the earthy scent of pine and damp soil. I've grown old here, content in the solitude, my only companions the chirping of crickets and the distant calls of owls. But recently, a shadow has crept into my life. one that threatens the quiet peace I've cultivated. I moved to this cabin after retiring from a lifetime of hard work in the city. The forest offered solace, a chance to reconnect with nature, and an opportunity to embrace a simpler life. I took up hunting, finding joy in tracking deer and listening to the whispers of the woods as I wandered under the expansive canopy. The thrill of the hunt was intoxicating, a reminder of my youth, and I felt at home among the trees. But over the last few months, a sense of unease has settled over me like a heavy fog. It started with the animals. The usual chatter of the woods fell silent. Deer stopped coming near my cabin, and the rustling of smaller creatures ceased. The air grew still, and an oppressive weight pressed down on the forest, as if something malevolent had taken root. One night, as the moon hung high in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the forest floor, I heard it, a howl that echoed through the stillness, primal and haunting. It sent shivers down my spine, a sound so unnatural that I found myself gripping the wooden table in my cabin, heart racing. The howl was unlike anything I had ever heard before, echoing with a deep, guttural resonance that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. I tried to convince myself it was just a coyote, but deep down, I knew this was different. That very night, I retrieved my old hunting rifle from the corner of the cabin, a trusted companion that had seen many hunts and many seasons. Its weight felt familiar in my hands, a reminder of the countless hours spent tracking game through the woods. I resolved to find out what was causing the disturbances. If it was a wolf, I would defend my home. If it was something else, well, I would face it head on. The next morning, I set out with a sense of purpose, the rifle slung over my shoulder and a satchel filled with supplies. I followed the worn path leading deeper into the woods, the sun filtering through the leaves, casting a dappled light on the forest floor. But as I walked, a creeping sense of dread filled my chest. The air felt charged, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As I ventured farther, I began to notice the signs. The ground was littered with tufts of fur, much larger than anything I had seen before. The trees bore scratch marks, deep gouges that looked as if they had been made by something powerful. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I pressed on, driven by the desire to uncover the truth. The day wore on, and just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, I stumbled upon a clearing I had never seen before. The air was thick with an eerie silence, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. In the center of the clearing stood a massive wolf, its coat a dark, shadowy hue that seemed to blend with the encroaching night. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, reflecting the dying light, and as I raised my rifle, I felt the weight of its gaze upon me. This was no ordinary wolf. It was larger than any animal I had ever seen, muscles rippling beneath its fur, each movement graceful and powerful. My heart raced as I fought against the instinct to flee. I steadied my breath, focusing on the beast before me. "Stay back," I called out, my voice wavering. The wolf did not respond. It simply stared, as if measuring my resolve. I felt an inexplicable connection to the creature, a feeling that ran deeper than fear. It was as though it could see into my soul, reading the stories of my life, etched in the lines of my face. In that moment, the howl I had heard echoed through my mind, and I realized it wasn't just a sound, it was a warning. I took a cautious step back, my finger hovering near the trigger, but I couldn't bring myself to pull it. Instead, I lowered the rifle, feeling the weight of the decision heavy on my conscience. The wolf remained motionless, and for a heartbeat, the world around us faded away, leaving just the two of us in that moment. Then, without warning, the wolf turned and bolted into the trees, vanishing into the shadows. My breath caught in my throat, a mix of relief and regret flooding my senses. I had the chance to end whatever menace lurked in the forest, yet I hesitated. What had I just witnessed? I returned to my cabin that night, the weight of the encounter hanging heavy in my mind. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on the walls, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was no longer safe. Sleep eluded me, my mind racing with questions. What was that creature? Was it a guardian, or was it something far more sinister? Days passed, and I continued my routine, but a lingering sense of unease settled over me. I heard the howl again and again, but each time it echoed through the night, I found myself grappling with the reality of my situation. Was I the intruder in its territory, or was it hunting me? On another chilly evening, emboldened by my initial encounter, I set out once more into the woods, determined to find the wolf again. The air was thick with mist, swirling around me like ghostly fingers. Each step felt heavier than the last, the forest seeming to close in around me. I could feel the weight of something watching me from the shadows, a presence that sent shivers down my spine. Hours passed, and just as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself in the same clearing as before. The sense of foreboding was palpable, and I felt as though I were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The forest held its breath, the silence deafening, and I was alone with my thoughts, wrestling with the implications of my actions. Suddenly, the howl rang out again, echoing through the trees like a siren call. It was closer this time, and I gripped my rifle tightly, heart pounding in my chest. The wolf emerged from the tree line, its massive form stepping into the clearing, eyes glowing in the dim light. It didn't approach. Instead, it stood at the edge, watching me with a gaze that felt almost human. "Why are you here?" I whispered, though I knew it could not answer. The wolf remained silent, its breath visible in the chilly air, and I felt the weight of its presence pressing down on me. In that moment, I understood. This creature was not merely a beast of the forest. It was a guardian of something far older than myself. The forest shifted around us, a slight breeze rustling the leaves. I felt an overwhelming urge to connect with this creature, to understand its purpose. "I'm not here to harm you," I called out, the words tumbling from my lips. "I've lived here for years, and I only want to coexist." The wolf tilted its head, and for a brief moment, I felt an inexplicable bond between us, a shared understanding that transcended words. But just as quickly, it turned and bounded back into the shadows, leaving me alone in the clearing once more. I stood there, rifle lowered, wrestling with a whirlwind of emotions. What was this creature trying to tell me? Was it truly a guardian, or was it leading me into a trap? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of something profound, something that would alter the course of my life. In the weeks that followed, the howls became more frequent, echoing through the night. I found myself drawn to the clearing, hoping for another encounter with the wolf. Each time, I felt a mix of fear and longing, the boundaries between hunter and hunted blurring with every passing moment. But as the days turned into weeks, the forest began to change. Trees that once stood tall and proud started to wither, their leaves turning brittle and falling to the ground. The animals vanished, and the silence grew oppressive, a tangible weight pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was unfolding within the woods. Then, one stormy night, the howl came again, more anguished than before. Lightning flashed, illuminating the trees in a harsh, brilliant light, and in that instant, I caught sight of the wolf. It was standing at the edge of the clearing, but something was wrong. Its fur was matted and dark, and its eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity. Without thinking, I grabbed my rifle and rushed outside. The wind howled around me, rain pelting my face as I approached the creature. "What's happening?" I shouted, desperation seeping into my voice. "What's wrong?" The wolf howled again, a mournful sound that echoed through the storm. I felt my heart race as I approached, unsure of what to do. It looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something deep within those eyes. Pain, sorrow, and a desperate plea for help. Just then, the forest erupted in chaos. Shadows moved through the trees, dark figures slithering between the trunks, and a sense of dread gripped me. Whatever malevolent force had taken hold of the woods was closing in, and the wolf was at the center of it. My instincts kicked in, and I raised my rifle, ready to defend both myself and the creature. But in that moment of tension, I hesitated. I couldn't bring myself to shoot. The wolf had not harmed me. It had shown me a world of mysteries and truths. As the dark figures loomed closer, I felt an overwhelming urge to protect the creature, to stand against whatever threat it faced. "Let it go," I shouted into the darkness, my voice rising above the storm. "You have no power here." The shadows paused, and for a moment, the world fell silent. The wolf stood beside me, its eyes locked on the darkness, and in that instant, I realized the truth. I was not alone. The forest was alive, and I was a part of it. With a sudden surge of courage, I lowered my rifle, letting it fall to the ground. I stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with the wolf, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The shadows retreated, whispering into the night, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But as the storm passed and the moon emerged from behind the clouds, the wolf turned to me, its golden eyes shining with something I couldn't quite grasp. In that moment, I understood. This creature was a guardian, a sentinel of the forest, and it had chosen me to stand by its side. But why? I had done nothing to deserve such a gift, yet here I was, intertwined in the fate of the woods. The wolf took a step back, its form slowly melding into the darkness, and I felt a pang of loss as it disappeared. In the days that followed, the forest began to heal. Animals returned, and life flourished once more. But a question lingered in my heart. What had I truly witnessed? Was the wolf a mere creature, or was it something more? As I stood on the porch of my cabin, watching the sun set over the trees, I felt the weight of the encounters pressing upon me. I had glimpsed a world beyond my understanding, one filled with guardians and shadows, but now I was left with a sense of uncertainty. The wolf had shown me the truth of my connection to the forest, yet I wondered, was I truly worthy of its trust? The whispers of the woods echoed in my mind, and I felt the forest calling me to remember my place within its vast tapestry. In the quiet of the night, I found myself questioning the nature of existence, the balance between humanity and the wild. As the moon rose high above the trees, casting an ethereal glow across the landscape, I knew that the mystery of the wolf would forever linger in my heart, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. My name is Alex Turner, and at 17, there's nothing I love more than wandering the winding trails of Pinewood Forest with my younger brother Max. The trees tower over us like ancient giants, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, and every step is filled with the thrill of discovery. Max is 10, full of curiosity and boundless energy, and his laughter rings through the air, a reminder of the innocence of childhood that I often wish to preserve as we roam deeper into the woods. Pinewood Forest has always been a place of wonder for us, a realm where our imaginations could run wild. We spent countless summer days exploring its hidden corners, building forts out of fallen branches, and pretending to be heroes on grand adventures. But as the seasons changed and the leaves began to fall, a strange unease settled over the forest, one that I couldn't quite shake off. It started with the silence. The usual symphony of birdsong faded, replaced by an unsettling stillness that hung in the air like a thick fog. I noticed it first during our weekend hikes. Max would race ahead, chasing after squirrels or butterflies, while I lingered back, feeling an inexplicable tension in the atmosphere. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. One crisp autumn afternoon, we decided to explore a part of the forest we had never ventured into before. The air was cool, the sun dipping lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground. Max was buzzing with excitement, his imagination running wild with thoughts of hidden treasures and secret paths. I smiled, trying to match his enthusiasm, but a nagging sense of foreboding tugged at my gut. "Come on, Alex, let's see what's over that hill," Max called, already racing ahead. I followed, shaking off my worries as we climbed to the top of a small rise. When we reached the summit, the view was breathtaking, an endless sea of trees stretching out before us, the golden hues of autumn painting the landscape in warm colors. "Wow, it's beautiful," Max exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. I nodded, but something caught my attention in the distance, a dark shape moving among the trees. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, but it vanished behind a thick cluster of pines, leaving me with an uneasy feeling. "Let's go down and explore." Max tugged at my sleeve, and I shook off the unsettling image, following him down the slope. We made our way through the underbrush, the sound of crunching leaves beneath our feet punctuating the silence. The deeper we ventured, the more I could feel a change in the atmosphere. Something was off, and it set my nerves on edge. After a while, we stumbled upon a small clearing. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the trees, illuminating the space like a hidden treasure. I felt a moment of relief wash over me, and I decided we could take a break. We sat on a fallen log, and I watched as Max began to toss pebbles into a small puddle, the water rippling in concentric circles. "Do you think we'll find treasure out here?" Max asked, his voice bright and innocent. "Maybe, but the real treasure is the adventure, right?" I replied, forcing a smile despite the nagging feeling in my gut. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing, I noticed a strange quiet had settled over us. The sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of crickets had faded into an oppressive silence. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but Max seemed oblivious, lost in his game. "Hey, let's go see what's over there." He pointed toward the edge of the clearing, where the trees grew denser. My heart raced as I stood, scanning the shadows, but I nodded. "Okay, just for a little while," I said, forcing myself to sound enthusiastic. As we walked toward the thicket, I felt an uncomfortable sense of being watched. The hair on the back of my neck prickled, and I glanced back over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking behind the trees. But there was nothing, just the quiet expanse of pinewood forest stretching out before us. When we reached the edge of the thicket, I pushed aside a curtain of branches, revealing a narrow path leading deeper into the woods. "What do you think is down there?" Max asked, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I don't know, but let's find out," I replied, trying to shake off the anxiety coiling in my stomach. As we made our way down the path, the trees seemed to close in around us, their gnarled branches twisting like fingers reaching for the sky. The air grew colder, and an unsettling stillness enveloped us. I tried to shake off my unease, but it clung to me like a second skin. Then, out of nowhere, a low growl rumbled through the air, sending a chill down my spine. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I looked at Max. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely above a murmur. Max nodded, his eyes wide with fear. "What was it?" he asked, glancing nervously around us. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, "but we should probably head back." As we turned to leave, the growl came again, louder this time, reverberating through the trees. Panic surged within me, and I grabbed Max's hand, pulling him along as we hurried back up the path. The oppressive silence that had settled over the forest was shattered by another growl, and I could feel something lurking in the shadows behind us. We burst back into the clearing, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I scanned the area. The sunlight was fading quickly, the trees casting long shadows that danced eerily across the ground. "We need to go now," I urged, tugging at Max's hand. But as we turned to leave, a massive figure emerged from the shadows. It stood at the edge of the clearing, its dark fur blending seamlessly with the shadows of the trees. My heart sank as I realized it was no ordinary wolf. This creature was enormous, its eyes gleaming with a predatory intelligence that sent waves of terror coursing through me. I could hardly breathe as the creature took a step forward, its massive frame moving with a fluid grace that belied its size. It let out a low, rumbling growl, and I felt every hair on my body stand on end. "Run!" I screamed, and we turned to bolt in the opposite direction. The forest blurred around us as we sprinted, my heart racing as I pushed myself to run faster. Max's small legs struggled to keep up, and I glanced back, panic rising in my chest as I saw the wolf charging after us. Its growls echoed through the trees, sending shockwaves of fear coursing through my veins. We stumbled through the underbrush, branches scratching at our arms and legs as we fought to escape. I could hear the creature's heavy breathing, feel the vibrations of its growls rumbling through the ground beneath us. I pushed Max ahead of me, urging him to run faster, to not look back. Finally, we burst into a small clearing, the last remnants of sunlight fading into twilight. I quickly scanned the area for a place to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The wolf was closing in, its eyes locked onto us, and I could feel the weight of its presence bearing down on us like a storm. "Climb that tree," I shouted, pointing to a tall oak nearby. Max hesitated for a split second before scrambling up the trunk, his small hands gripping the rough bark. I followed closely behind, adrenaline fueling my movements as I climbed higher, desperate to escape the creature below. We reached a sturdy branch and clung to it, our hearts racing as we looked down. The wolf circled the base of the tree, its growls rumbling like thunder. I could see the glint of its teeth, sharp and white, as it prowled beneath us. My breath came in ragged gasps as I struggled to comprehend what was happening. "Alex, what is that thing?" Max whimpered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I replied, my own voice trembling. "But we need to stay quiet. If it hears us." The wolf paused, its ears perked up as it seemed to sense our presence above. My heart raced as I tried to stifle my breathing, panic clawing at my throat. The creature looked up at us, its golden eyes glowing in the dim light, and for a moment, everything fell silent. We sat frozen, time stretching into eternity as the wolf stared at us, its expression inscrutable. I could feel a connection forming, a deep understanding that transcended words. But the moment shattered as it let out a thunderous howl, a sound that reverberated through the forest and echoed in my very bones. It was a call to the wild, a declaration of dominance that sent chills coursing through me. "We have to move," I whispered urgently to Max, who was trembling beside me. Just as I was about to climb down, the wolf turned and bounded away into the trees, its massive form disappearing into the shadows. I felt a rush of relief flood through me, but it was quickly overshadowed by confusion. "What just happened?" I murmured, glancing at Max. I don't know," he stammered, eyes wide with fear. "Do you think it's gone?" "I hope so," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. After a few minutes of tense silence, I decided it was time to leave the safety of the tree. We climbed down slowly, scanning the area for any signs of the creature. As we reached the ground, the shadows grew longer, the air thickening with an uneasy tension. "Let's go home," I said, gripping Max's hand tightly. He nodded, and we began to retrace our steps through the forest, my heart racing with every sound that rustled in the underbrush. The walk back felt endless, the shadows growing darker with each passing moment. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the sense that the wolf was still out there, lurking just beyond the trees. The silence weighed heavily on me, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder every few seconds, half expecting to see those glowing eyes staring back. When we finally reached the edge of the forest, the familiar sight of our neighborhood felt like a sanctuary. We rushed home, locking the door behind us, our hearts still pounding in our chests. I turned to Max, trying to mask my own fear with a reassuring smile. "We're safe now," I said, though my voice trembled. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the image of the wolf from my mind. Its golden eyes haunted me, and I felt a deep sense of unease settling over me. What had we witnessed in the woods? Had we stumbled upon something ancient, something that belonged to the forest? Or had we merely encountered a wild animal, driven by instincts I could never hope to understand? My thoughts spiraled, questions racing through my mind as I fought to find answers. Days turned into weeks, and while life returned to normal, the memory of that encounter lingered like a ghost in my mind. I tried to put it behind me, but the feeling of being watched never fully left. I began to notice strange things in the forest, the way the animals acted skittish, the whispers in the wind that felt like warnings. Every time I ventured into Pinewood, I felt a sense of dread creeping over me, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had angered something, if the wolf had been a guardian of the woods, protecting its territory from intruders. I found myself questioning everything I had thought I knew about the forest, about nature, and the creatures that called it home. As I lay in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, I pondered the meaning behind our encounter. The wolf had shown me a glimpse of a world I had never understood, one that existed just beyond the veil of the ordinary. But what was I supposed to do with that knowledge? I stared out the window, the moon casting a silvery glow over Pinewood Forest. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and I felt a pull to return, to confront the shadows that haunted me. I realized I had a choice to make, to let fear control me or to embrace the unknown, to discover the secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface of the familiar. In the end, I knew I would return to the forest, but with a new understanding, a recognition of the balance between humanity and nature, the beauty and terror that coexisted in the wild. Pinewood Forest held its secrets close, but I was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. And as I closed my eyes that night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would return to the shadows, to the place where the lines between man and beast blurred, to seek the truth of what I had witnessed. I've always found solace in the wilderness, far away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. There's something cathartic about solo camping in the heart of a forest, surrounded by towering trees and the soothing sounds of nature. At 42, I've embraced the outdoors with a passion that only seems to deepen with each passing year, trading city lights for starlit skies and crowded streets for the tranquility of the wild. Last autumn, I decided to venture deeper into Blackwood Forest than ever before. The forest is vast, a sprawling maze of towering pines and dense underbrush, and it's known for its beauty and isolation. I'd camped there many times, always drawn to the serenity it provided, but this time felt different. A quiet unease settled over me as I set up my tent in a small clearing, surrounded by trees that loomed like silent guardians. As dusk fell, I lit a small fire and watched the flames dance, casting flickering shadows that played across the ground. The crackle of burning wood was comforting, a reminder of home. I prepared a simple dinner, the aroma mingling with the earthy scent of damp leaves and moss. It was perfect, a chance to disconnect, recharge, and reflect on life. But as night deepened, an unsettling silence enveloped the forest. The usual chorus of crickets and rustling leaves faded away, replaced by a heavy stillness that seemed to press in around me. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a primal instinct warning me that I wasn't alone. I dismissed it as paranoia, the product of solitude and the vastness of the woods. But as I sat by the fire, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I scanned the darkness beyond the glow of the flames, but saw only trees, their branches swaying gently in the wind. Shaking my head, I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was here to enjoy the peace of nature. That's when I heard it, a low, haunting howl that pierced the stillness of the night. It sent chills racing down my spine, a sound so primal and chilling that it felt like an echo from some ancient time. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, listening intently as the howl reverberated through the trees, lingering in the air long after it had faded. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, deep and resonant, filled with a sorrow that tugged at something deep within me. I grabbed my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as I stood and moved toward the sound. "Hello?" I called out, my voice wavering in the silence. No response came, only the rustling of leaves as the wind picked up. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I stepped deeper into the darkness, drawn by an inexplicable need to uncover the source of the howl. The forest felt alive, the shadows shifting and swirling around me. I strained my ears, trying to pick up any sounds, but the night was deafeningly quiet. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I hesitated, uncertainty creeping into my mind, but I pressed on, driven by a mixture of curiosity and fear. As I wandered further from the safety of the fire, the air grew colder, and the trees loomed ever closer, their twisted branches forming gnarled shapes against the night sky. The howl echoed again, this time closer, resonating through the woods like a mournful lament. I felt a wave of dread wash over me, and I took a step back, but my foot caught on a root, sending me sprawling to the ground. I cursed under my breath, pushing myself back to my feet. The howl pierced the silence again, louder and more urgent. I turned to run back to my campsite, but a sudden movement in the shadows caught my eye. I froze, heart racing as I focused on the darkness. There, just beyond the reach of my flashlight, I saw it, a massive shape moving silently between the trees. My breath hitched in my throat as I caught my first glimpse of the creature. It was a wolf, but not like any wolf I had ever seen. Its size was unnatural, towering over the underbrush, its fur a deep midnight black that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes glinted like shards of amber, piercing through the darkness as it regarded me with an unsettling intelligence. I felt a mixture of awe and terror wash over me. "What the hell are you?" I whispered, though I knew it wouldn't answer. The creature took a step closer, and I could see its muscles ripple beneath its thick fur, every inch of it radiating raw power. It let out another howl, a mournful sound that sent shivers coursing through me. Instinct kicked in, and I turned to flee, racing back toward the clearing where I had set up my camp. I could hear the creature crashing through the underbrush behind me, its heavy footsteps growing louder with each passing second. I stumbled, fear propelling me forward as I burst into the clearing, the light of the fire flickering against the encroaching darkness. I grabbed my backpack and scrambled to retrieve my camping knife, feeling the weight of it in my hand as I turned to face the darkness. The wolf emerged from the shadows, its eyes locked onto me, glowing fiercely in the firelight. I felt a primal urge to defend myself, but I also felt a strange pull toward the creature, a connection that I couldn't explain. "Stay back!" I shouted, raising the knife, that, though my voice trembled with fear. The wolf paused at the edge of the firelight, its massive frame silhouetted against the darkness. For a moment, we stood there, locked in an unspoken standoff, both of us uncertain of what to do next. Then, as if sensing my fear, the wolf let out a low growl, deep and resonant, a sound that vibrated through my bones. It stepped forward, its body silhouetted by the flickering flames, and I felt a rush of adrenaline surge through me. I took a step back, the fire crackling as I prepared to defend myself. But instead of lunging at me, the wolf hesitated, its head tilting to the side as if trying to understand me. The growl subsided, and in its place, an unsettling silence fell over the clearing. I could feel its gaze boring into me, and in that moment, I wondered if it could sense the fear radiating from my body. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The wolf let out a soft whine, almost mournful, and I felt an unexpected pang of empathy wash over me. I could see the scars etched into its fur, the remnants of past battles that had shaped it into the creature before me. It took a tentative step forward, and for a heartbeat, I felt the urge to lower my weapon, to let go of my fear. But the weight of the unknown loomed large, and I clutched the knife tighter, unsure of what would happen next. The wolf stopped again, its amber eyes never leaving mine. I could sense a depth to its gaze, an ancient wisdom that transcended our worlds. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just a creature of instinct. It was something more. Something that held secrets of the forest within its very being. "Please, just leave me alone," I said, my voice trembling. The wolf's ears perked up, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in its eyes. It stood there, caught between its wild instincts and some unspoken connection we shared. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the wolf turned and bounded back into the darkness, melting away into the trees as if it had never been there at all. I stood frozen, the knife still raised, heart pounding in my chest as I processed what had just happened. The fire crackled and popped, the warmth slowly returning as I lowered the knife, breathless and shaken. I sank to the ground, staring into the flames as questions raced through my mind. What had I just witnessed? Was it truly a wolf, or had I encountered something far more sinister? I spent the remainder of the night sitting by the fire, the echoes of the howl ringing in my ears. My mind raced with thoughts of the creature, the power it exuded, the sadness in its howl, the connection we had shared for that fleeting moment. But as dawn broke, the reality of my encounter settled heavily on my chest. When I finally packed up my campsite and began the trek back through the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. The forest, once a familiar haven, now felt foreign and foreboding, each rustle in the leaves sending a jolt of fear through me. What had I truly encountered in those woods? Was it merely a wolf, or something more ancient, a guardian of the forest that had chosen to reveal itself to me? As I walked, I pondered the nature of the wilderness, the beauty and terror that coexisted in a delicate balance. And as I stepped out of the shadows of Blackwood Forest, I was left with one burning question. Had I truly witnessed a glimpse of the wild spirit, or had I merely stumbled into the unknown, forever haunted by the howls of a creature that belonged to the dark? I've always found peace in the forest, particularly while hiking with my loyal dog Max. There's something invigorating about the crisp air and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot, especially as a 38-year-old man who craves the simplicity of nature over the chaos of daily life. Max, a golden retriever with boundless energy, always seemed to share my enthusiasm, his tail wagging excitedly as we explored the winding trails of Pine Ridge. On a bright Saturday morning, I decided to venture onto a new trail that promised stunning views and a sense of adventure. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground, and I felt a thrill of excitement. Hiking was more than just a pastime for me. It was a chance to escape, to reconnect with nature, and to bond with Max. As we hiked, the trail twisted and turned, leading us deeper into the heart of Pine Ridge. The air was fragrant with pine and damp earth, and I reveled in the sounds of birds singing and leaves rustling. Max darted ahead, chasing after squirrels and sniffing at the underbrush, his playful antics bringing a smile to my face. We hiked for hours, the sun climbing higher in the sky. After a while, we reached a clearing that overlooked a picturesque valley, a breathtaking vista of trees stretching as far as the eye could see. I sat on a large rock, catching my breath, and took a moment to appreciate the beauty surrounding us. Max lay beside me, panting happily, his golden fur glistening in the sunlight. But as I sat there, I felt an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. The forest seemed to grow quiet, the usual sounds of wildlife fading away until only silence enveloped us. A sense of unease prickled at the back of my mind, and I glanced around, trying to shake off the feeling. "Let's head back, buddy," I said, patting Max on the head. He looked up at me, his ears perked, but he seemed oblivious to the tension in the air. I rose to my feet, and we began our descent back down the trail. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The silence weighed heavily, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder more often than usual. Max, usually so spirited, seemed to sense my anxiety, his playful demeanor replaced by a cautious alertness. He paused frequently, ears pricked, as if listening for something just beyond our perception. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. The forest, which had felt welcoming earlier, now appeared more ominous, the darkening woods pressing in around us. I quickened my pace, eager to return to the familiarity of home. That's when I heard it, a low growl that rumbled through the air, deep and menacing. My heart raced as I stopped in my tracks, glancing around wildly. Max froze beside me, his body tense, and I could feel the primal instinct in him as he shifted into a protective stance. "Max, stay close," I whispered, a chill creeping down my spine. The growl echoed again, louder this time, reverberating through the trees. It was unlike any sound I had ever heard, both haunting and powerful, sending a jolt of fear through me. I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to get out of the forest, but curiosity rooted me to the spot. "What was that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Max whimpered softly, eyes fixed on the dense underbrush ahead. Before I could think, the sound came again, closer. It was a deep, throaty growl, resonating with an otherworldly quality that sent shockwaves through my body. My breath quickened as I strained to peer into the darkness, searching for the source. And then suddenly, a massive shape emerged from the shadows. My heart dropped as I realized it wasn't just a wolf. It was something far more formidable. The creature stood nearly as tall as my waist, its fur a dark mottled gray that blended seamlessly with the shadows of the trees. Its eyes, gleaming like shards of amber, locked onto mine, filled with an intelligence that sent shivers down my spine. I felt frozen in place, both fear and awe coursing through me as the wolf-like creature regarded me with an intensity that felt almost sentient. It let out another growl, low and threatening, and I instinctively took a step back, pulling Max closer to me. The creature's gaze shifted to my dog, its growl deepening. "Stay back," I shouted, raising my hands in a futile gesture of defense. But deep down, I felt a strange connection, a recognition that went beyond mere instinct. This creature was no ordinary wolf. It was something primal and ancient, a guardian of the forest in its own right. Max, however, didn't share my curiosity. With a bark that shattered the silence, he lunged forward, teeth bared, ready to defend me. The creature's growl intensified, a warning that sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Max, no!" I shouted, but it was too late. The creature sprang forward, its movements fluid and swift, and I barely had time to react. I grabbed Max's collar, yanking him back just as the creature lunged toward us, its powerful jaws snapping inches from my dog's fur. We stumbled backward, terror coursing through my veins as I scrambled to regain my footing. The creature hesitated for a brief moment, assessing us, and in that instant, I saw the scars that marred its fur, remnants of past battles etched into its flesh. It was a survivor, a creature forged by the wild, and my heart raced with conflicting emotions. "Let's go, Max," I urged, yanking my dog away from the creature's reach. We turned and ran, adrenaline fueling our flight as we sprinted down the path, the pounding of our hearts drowning out the world around us. The forest blurred by us, and I could hear the creature's growl echoing behind us, a haunting sound that seemed to resonate with the very essence of the woods. Branches whipped at my arms as we dashed through the underbrush, the shadows closing in around us. I could feel the creature's presence stalking us, its heavy footsteps echoing through the trees, and I pushed myself to run faster. Max kept pace beside me, his loyalty unwavering even in the face of danger. As we neared the clearing, I could see the last remnants of sunlight filtering through the trees. The warmth of the fading light felt like a lifeline, a beacon guiding us back to safety. We burst into the clearing, panting and desperate, and I turned to look back at the darkness, my heart racing. The creature emerged from the shadows, standing at the edge of the clearing, its massive form silhouetted against the dying light. It let out one final haunting howl, a sound that echoed through the forest and sent chills racing down my spine. And then, just like that, it vanished back into the darkness, leaving me trembling and breathless. I collapsed to the ground, my heart pounding in my chest as I clutched Max close to me. "We made it," I whispered, but the relief felt hollow. What had just happened? Had I truly encountered a creature of the wild, or had my mind conjured a figment of my fears? The forest around me felt eerily quiet now, the usual sounds of nature muted as if the world was still reeling from the encounter. I struggled to make sense of what I had witnessed. Was the creature a guardian, protecting its territory? Or was it a feral beast, driven by instinct and rage? As I caught my breath, I realized I could still hear the echo of that mournful howl resonating in my ears, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of ancient stories and forgotten legends. Had I stepped into a realm where the boundaries between reality and myth blurred, where the wild still held its secrets close? After gathering my belongings, still shaken, I began the long trek back to my car, Max faithfully at my side. The forest, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now loomed with an air of mystery and danger. Each rustle of leaves and snap of twigs set my nerves on edge, reminding me of the creature that had stalked us through the darkness. As we navigated the familiar trail, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The trees seemed to whisper secrets as I passed, and I could almost sense the presence of the wolf-like creature lurking just beyond my sight. Had it been a mere animal, or was it something more, a force of nature that transcended understanding? The more I thought about it, the more questions flooded my mind. What had triggered its aggressive behavior? Was it protecting its territory, or simply responding to a threat? The scars on its body told tales of past encounters, and I found myself wondering what had shaped it into the being I had just faced. When I finally reached my car, the relief washed over me like a tide, but the questions remained. I leaned against the vehicle, staring into the depths of Pine Ridge, where shadows danced among the trees. What had I encountered in those woods? What did it mean for my understanding of the wild? As I drove away, the landscape blurred past me, but my mind was racing with thoughts of the creature. I realized I had only scratched the surface of what existed in the depths of the forest. Pine Ridge, a place I had loved for years, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets, where the familiar could turn into the extraordinary in an instant. That night, I lay in bed, the image of the creature burned into my mind. I replayed the encounter over and over, trying to dissect every moment. The growl, the eyes, the howl, they echoed in my thoughts, refusing to fade. Sleep eluded me, my heart racing with remnants of adrenaline and a creeping dread. In the days that followed, I found myself returning to Pine Ridge, drawn back despite the terror of my last visit. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed answers. The forest was part of me, and the encounter felt like a puzzle I had to solve. Max remained by my side, as eager as ever to explore, blissfully unaware of the weight of what we had faced. As I hiked deeper into the woods, I searched for signs of the creature, hoping to catch a glimpse of the entity that had so powerfully affected me. But the forest remained stubbornly quiet, each step echoing with the solitude of my thoughts. Had I imagined it? Was it merely a figment of an overactive imagination, conjured by fear? Then, one evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the ground, I stumbled upon a peculiar clearing. The trees formed a natural circle, and in the center lay a series of large, deep paw prints, much larger than any wolf I had ever seen. My breath caught in my throat as I knelt to examine them, my heart pounding in a mix of fear and exhilaration. Each print told a story, a testament to the creature's presence. As I studied the marks in the dirt, a sense of connection washed over me. These prints were proof that I hadn't been alone in my experience. Something more was out there, something ancient and powerful. Max sniffed at the ground, tail wagging, but I could feel a shift in the atmosphere. The air grew thick, and the familiar sounds of the forest faded once more, replaced by a profound silence. I glanced around, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Then, from the shadows of the trees, I heard it again, the growl. It rumbled low, echoing through the clearing, and I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I stood up, ready to defend Max, but my instincts told me to stay still, to observe. Emerging from the tree line, the creature stepped into the clearing, its massive frame silhouetted against the fading light. This time, I saw it more clearly. It was even larger than I remembered, its powerful muscles rippling beneath the dark fur. The scars across its body glinted in the low light, telling stories of survival and struggle. The creature's eyes met mine, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. There was a sense of understanding that transcended words, a recognition of something primal that linked us. I felt a strange calm wash over me, as if the forest itself had breathed life into this moment. But as quickly as it had come, the calm faded. The creature growled again, its voice filled with warning. I felt the weight of its presence, the raw power that radiated from it, and instinctively took a step back. Max growled softly beside me, sensing the tension. "Please, we mean no harm," I found myself saying, the words spilling from my lips in desperation. "We're just exploring." The creature's growl softened slightly, but it remained wary, its body tense as if preparing for an encounter. I could feel the energy shifting, the air charged with an electric tension. It took a slow step forward, and I instinctively stepped back. Max barked again, more assertively this time, and the creature halted, its amber eyes flickering toward my dog. "Max, stop!" I commanded, though I knew the creature posed no immediate threat. It felt like we were caught in a strange dance, a battle of instincts between man and beast. I took a deep breath, willing myself to remain calm. And then, in an unexpected twist, the creature let out a low, almost mournful sound. It was a howl that resonated with emotion, echoing through the clearing. I could feel the weight of its sadness, a longing that pierced through the tension. It was as if the creature was reaching out, trying to communicate in a way that words could never express. I stood there, frozen, my heart heavy with understanding. This was no mere monster. It was a creature bound to the forest, a sentinel of sorts, carrying the weight of its history on its shoulders. I felt a surge of compassion, an urge to understand what it had endured. The creature seemed to sense my shift in energy, its posture relaxing slightly. It regarded me with an intensity that made my breath hitch. In that moment, I realized that I was no longer afraid. Instead, I was filled with a sense of wonder. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned and vanished back into the depths of the forest, leaving only a whisper of its presence behind. I stood in the clearing, heart racing, trying to process what had just happened. "What was that, Max?" I whispered, still reeling from the encounter. My faithful dog nuzzled against my leg, as if sensing my turmoil. I knelt down to scratch his ears, grounding myself in the familiar warmth of his presence. The days that followed were filled with a sense of urgency. I delved into local legends and stories about Pine Ridge, seeking any mention of the creature I had encountered. Old tales spoke of forest guardians and ancient spirits, protectors of the land that held the secrets of the wild. I became obsessed, wanting to uncover the truth of the being I had faced. With each hike, I sought the clearing, hoping for another glimpse. The forest felt alive with potential, a place where the mundane and the magical intertwined. I learned to navigate the trails with a new awareness, a deep respect for the land that surrounded me. But each time I returned, the creature eluded me. The paw prints remained a reminder of our encounter, and I found myself grappling with questions that refused to fade. What had I seen? What was this entity that had watched over the woods for so long? One evening, as I stood at the edge of the clearing, I felt a sudden chill sweep through the air. The sunlight was fading, and the shadows stretched long across the ground. The forest had grown quiet once more, the familiar sounds of wildlife fading into an eerie stillness. Then I heard it, the low growl reverberating through the trees. My heart raced as I turned, scanning the shadows for any sign of the creature. "Show yourself," I called out, my voice steady despite the fear creeping in. And then, like a dark specter, the creature emerged from the shadows. It stood there, majestic and fearsome, its eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. The growl deepened, but there was a new quality to it, curiosity. I took a cautious step forward, feeling a connection pulling me toward the creature. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said, my voice low and soothing. "I want to understand." The creature tilted its head slightly, as if processing my words. The growl subsided, replaced by a low, rumbling sound that echoed in the stillness. I felt the weight of its presence, the raw power that emanated from it, and I knew this was a moment I would never forget. We stood there, locked in a silent exchange, two beings from different worlds seeking connection. In that moment, I realized that I was no longer just a hiker in the forest. I had become a part of its story, intertwined with the mysteries that lay hidden within the trees. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest transformed, shadows dancing and shifting like whispers of old tales. The creature took a step back, watching me with those piercing amber eyes, and I felt a sense of understanding wash over me. This was a guardian of the forest, a creature shaped by the wild, and I had been granted a glimpse into its world. With a final rumble that echoed through the clearing, the creature turned and vanished into the depths of the forest. I stood there, breathless, my heart racing with the weight of what I had just witnessed. What did it mean for my understanding of the wild? What secrets did Pine Ridge still hold? As I made my way back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been changed forever. The encounter had awakened something deep within me, a connection to the primal forces of nature that I had never fully grasped. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the moments in the clearing over and over again. The creature's gaze lingered in my mind, and I felt a mixture of awe and confusion. What had I truly encountered? Was it merely a guardian, or was it something more, an ancient force tied to the very essence of the forest? The questions continued to swirl in my mind, refusing to settle. I had been a mere observer of nature, but now I felt called to something greater. The boundaries of humanity and the wild had blurred, and I knew I had touched something profound. In the following weeks, I became a regular at the forest, each hike a journey of discovery. But despite my efforts, I never encountered the creature again. Yet, I felt its presence in the rustling leaves and the whispers of the wind. The forest had become a tapestry of stories, each visit revealing more about the wild and its guardians. As I stood at the edge of the forest one evening, looking into the depths of Pine Ridge, I felt a strange mix of gratitude and longing. I had witnessed something. Kayaking has always been my escape. The world melts away as I paddle through the misty waters of the deep forest river, the gnarled trees arching overhead like ancient sentinels. I thrive on the challenge, the swift currents, the hidden eddies, the call of the wild. Each stroke of my paddle sends ripples through the water, and with them, the stress of daily life dissipates. It was a passion ignited by a friend who had long since moved away, leaving me to explore these waters alone. I embraced solitude, believing the wilderness had a voice only I could hear. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting an orange glow across the rippling surface, I decided to venture further than I ever had before. The forest thickened around me, and the world turned quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. I felt a thrill run through me, the sort that comes from doing something you know might be a mistake. The deeper I paddled, the more the light faded. Shadows danced on the water, and the trees seemed to close in around me. I glanced at my watch. The sun would set soon, but I wasn't ready to turn back. The pull of adventure urged me forward. As I rounded a bend, something caught my eye, a flash of movement among the trees. I squinted, searching the underbrush, but there was nothing there. I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just the wind, or perhaps a deer. But as I continued, an unsettling feeling settled in my gut, a sensation I couldn't shake. It began as a whisper, a rustle behind me, light enough to be ignored at first. The further I paddled, the more pronounced it became. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the familiar face of my friend who had once joined me on these adventures, but instead, I found nothing but the fading light and darkening trees. I shook my head, attributing it to the creeping dusk. After all, I was alone, and the solitude can play tricks on the mind. I paddled harder, attempting to shake the unease that clung to me like a damp fog. Then I saw it, a flash of fur, quick and almost spectral, disappearing into the underbrush. I paused, my heart racing. "Just an animal," I muttered to myself. But that whisper grew louder, the rustling sounds moving closer as if something were tracking me, watching me. I paddled faster, the river's current now feeling less like a companion and more like a taunting adversary. Each stroke sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, and the whispers became a cacophony in my mind. I glanced back again, and this time I caught sight of it, a figure lurking just beyond the trees. The creature was massive, larger than any wolf I had ever seen, its fur a tangled mass of dark shadows and matted leaves. Its eyes glowed like twin embers, watching me with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. A chill ran down my spine, and for a moment, the world around me froze. The creature held my gaze, unblinking, its presence a weight pressing against my chest. I had heard stories of creatures lurking in the woods, tales of the dogman, a half-man, half-beast that prowled the forest, drawing strength from fear. My heart hammered in my chest as I struggled to remember if those were just stories. As if sensing my terror, the creature stepped out from the shadows, the evening light catching its silhouette. It was undeniably wolf-like, but its form was twisted, grotesque. The limbs seemed too long, and its gait was unnaturally fluid. It moved with an eerie grace that sent a fresh wave of dread washing over me. I couldn't breathe. Instinct told me to flee, but the river's current held me captive. I could feel its eyes boring into me, reading the fear etched across my face. The water felt colder, the air thicker, as I fought against the tide, a primal urge compelling me to escape. Then, as if the creature had conjured the shadows around it, it let out a low growl that reverberated through the forest. The sound was guttural, echoing like a warning, and I knew then that I was not welcome in this part of the woods. Panic surged, and I began to paddle frantically, urgency fueling my every stroke. But the creature was quick. It bounded along the riverbank, keeping pace with me, a silent predator in pursuit. Each time I glanced back, it was there, just out of reach but ever present. The river twisted and turned, and I fought to maintain my course, the edges of my vision blurring as I focused solely on escaping. Just a dream. I whispered to myself, though deep down I knew the truth. I was wide awake, trapped in a waking nightmare. The whispers grew louder, a haunting symphony of rustling leaves and snapping twigs that felt like an invocation, summoning something dark and primal. I turned a corner and skidded to a halt. Before me lay a small cove, the water calm and inviting, yet the trees loomed like dark giants, whispering secrets in a language I couldn't comprehend. I hesitated, weighing my options. The creature was closing in. I could sense it, a shadow lurking just beyond my vision. Desperate, I maneuvered my kayak into the cove, hoping to hide among the overhanging branches. My heart raced as I stilled my paddles, holding my breath. The whispers grew distant, and for a moment, I thought I had lost it. But just as hope began to blossom, I heard it, a soft pad of footsteps on the bank, and then a rustle of leaves. I peered cautiously over the edge of my kayak, my heart pounding in my ears. There it was, the creature, sniffing the air, its eyes scanning the water. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was searching for me. Every instinct told me to remain still, but fear clawed at my insides. What did it want? The stories told of madness, of people who disappeared without a trace, and I suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of urgency to escape. Then, in an unexpected moment of clarity, I remembered the whistle attached to my life jacket. It had always been a safety measure, but now it felt like my only lifeline. With trembling hands, I grasped it and blew sharply, the shrill sound piercing the silence of the forest. The creature's ears perked up, and for a moment it froze. The world around me seemed to hold its breath. I blew again, the sound echoing off the trees, reverberating through the cove. In that moment, I felt a flicker of power, a call to arms, a challenge. The creature turned its head, narrowing its eyes, and then it let out a howl that sent shivers down my spine. It echoed through the woods, a sound that was both mournful and menacing. The howl seemed to call back the very shadows from which it came, and I felt the ground beneath me tremble as if the earth itself were answering. Instinct kicked in. I pushed away from the bank with all my strength, paddling furiously into the open water. The howling continued behind me, an unholy symphony that echoed off the trees, and I didn't dare look back. The river's current was fierce, but my fear propelled me forward. As I navigated the twists and turns, the darkness deepened. The sun was now a distant memory, and the only light came from the flickering fireflies hovering over the water. My mind raced. Was it truly chasing me, or was it a figment of my own paranoia? The whispers returned, a chorus of doubt seeping into my thoughts. I could almost hear the creature taunting me, urging me to slow down, to surrender to the dark. I fought back the urge to listen, to succumb to the despair creeping into my mind. I was an intruder in its domain, and it wanted me to remember that. But I refused to be just another story, another whisper among the trees. I paddled harder, desperately seeking the familiar bends and landmarks that would guide me back to safety. Every splash of the paddle felt like a countdown, and I could almost sense the creature drawing closer with each passing moment. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw the outline of a clearing up ahead. The river widened, the water sparkling faintly in the moonlight. My heart leapt as I paddled with renewed vigor, desperate to escape the clutches of whatever haunted these waters. Just as I neared the edge of the clearing, I heard a final bone-chilling howl pierce the night, a sound that echoed in my bones. It reverberated through the trees and faded into the depths of the forest, leaving only silence in its wake. I glanced back one last time, but there was nothing, just darkness. I pulled my kayak onto the bank and stumbled out, my legs shaky beneath me. I felt a weight lift as I made my way back to my car, the oppressive feeling of being watched fading with each step. But as I reached the road, a creeping doubt settled in the pit of my stomach. What had I truly witnessed? Was it the dogman of folklore, a creature born from fear and the wild? Or was it simply the manifestation of my own anxiety, a reflection of the solitude I had embraced? I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted within me, a crack in the veneer of my reality. As I drove away, the forest loomed behind me, an enigmatic presence shrouded in mystery. I knew I would return to those waters, but a chill ran down my spine at the thought. What I had witnessed lingered in my mind like a ghost, its implications swirling like mist on the river. Days turned into weeks, but I couldn't shake the memory of that encounter. The whispers in the woods haunted my thoughts, and I found myself drawn back to the river, compelled to understand what had happened. Each night, I lay awake, grappling with questions that gnawed at my sanity. Was it real? Was it merely a figment of my imagination, a trick of the light, or something far more sinister? Eventually, I decided to return, the allure of the unknown pulling me back despite my fear. I couldn't deny that I felt a strange connection to the forest, an inexplicable bond that both frightened and intrigued me. I packed my kayak with supplies, determined to face whatever lay ahead. The moment I arrived, the air felt different, thicker, charged with an energy that set my nerves on edge. The river glistened under the midday sun, deceptively tranquil, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I paddled out, my heart racing with every stroke. As I entered the deeper stretches of the river, the light began to fade, the trees growing denser. I was prepared for the encounter, yet dread seeped into my bones. The quietness that once comforted me now felt oppressive, almost suffocating. As I navigated the familiar bends, I kept my eyes peeled, half expecting to see the creature lurking just out of sight. Hours passed, and I felt the tension build within me. Just when I began to think I might have imagined the whole thing, I saw it. A flicker of movement among the trees. There it was, the massive form, hidden among the shadows, watching me with those glowing eyes. My heart raced as it stepped into view, its features even more pronounced in the daylight. Long limbs, a snout that seemed almost human in its cunning. I couldn't look away. I was trapped in its gaze, and every instinct screamed at me to paddle away. But I was here to confront it, to understand. I forced myself to breathe, to steady my racing heart. The creature let out a low growl, a sound that reverberated through the air, echoing in the stillness. I gripped my paddle tightly, a lifeline to reality. In that moment, I realized that fear had always been a choice. It was powerful, yes, but it didn't have to define me. I raised my paddle, pointing it at the creature, as if to challenge it. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, the words echoing off the water. The creature tilted its head, almost curious. The growl softened, and I felt an unexpected shift in the air. It stepped closer to the riverbank, and I felt an overwhelming sense of connection wash over me. This was no ordinary beast. It was a guardian of the forest, a keeper of secrets. The tension eased, and as I looked into its eyes, I understood that my fear was unfounded. This creature had watched over these woods long before I ever arrived, and I was merely an intruder, curious and foolish. As I sat in my kayak, the creature and I shared a moment, a silent understanding that transcended words. I began to feel a strange kinship with it, as if I had crossed an invisible barrier. Maybe it was the fear of the unknown that had truly haunted me all along. Slowly, the creature retreated, disappearing back into the underbrush, and I found myself in a profound silence. The water around me glistened like a mirror, reflecting not just the trees, but my own thoughts. I felt the urge to paddle away, yet I remained still, captivated by what had just occurred. With each stroke as I made my way back to shore, the weight of that encounter settled on me. I pondered what I had witnessed, questioning the very nature of reality itself. Was the dogman a creature of myth, a figment of imagination, or something real that dwelled in the hidden corners of the forest? As I reached the clearing and pulled my kayak ashore, I realized I had changed. I no longer felt like a visitor in this wild place. I was part of it now. The whispers no longer frightened me. They were a reminder of the balance that existed between humanity and nature. Yet, as I drove away, I couldn't shake the sense of lingering uncertainty. What had truly happened? What did it mean to witness something so primal, so beyond understanding? And why did the creature choose to show itself to me? I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see it standing at the water's edge, watching me leave. But the forest remained still, its secrets intact. The river would always call me back, a thread woven into my very being. But I would return not just as a kayaker, but as someone who had faced the unknown. I've always loved hiking in the deep forests. There's something about the challenge that pulls me in. The way the trees seem to close in around you, creating a living maze of greens and browns, punctuated only by the occasional flash of color from wildflowers. There's a thrill in navigating the unknown, testing your physical limits, and surrendering to the rhythms of nature. But this time would be different. It was late October when I decided to hike the Cedarwood Trail, a remote path I'd read about online. The reviews described it as beautiful but treacherous, with steep inclines and thick underbrush. I was exhilarated by the thought of conquering it, imagining myself reaching the summit just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I packed my gear, a water bottle, some snacks, and my phone, which I would use as a map. I set out early, the cool morning air invigorating as I slipped into my rhythm. The deeper I ventured into the forest, the more I felt like an explorer, uncovering secrets hidden from the world. Birds flitted above, and the distant sound of a brook serenaded my steps. Everything felt alive. But as the hours passed, the sun climbed higher, casting shadows that danced and twisted in unnatural ways. I found myself wrapped up in the beauty of it all, pushing deeper along the trail. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a low battery warning. I quickly pulled it out, glancing at the screen, 20% left. I had neglected to charge it fully, a rookie mistake. I pressed on, thinking that surely I would find a good spot to turn back soon. However, as the terrain became more rugged, I realized I had lost track of time. Trees towered overhead, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The path I had been following began to fade, swallowed by the encroaching wilderness. It wasn't long before I came to a fork in the trail. One path veered to the left, overgrown and tangled, while the right led deeper into the woods. With no clear choice and my phone rapidly draining, I opted for the right path, hoping it would lead me back to civilization. As I pushed forward, I felt a creeping sense of unease, like someone was watching me. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was just the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But the feeling intensified. I paused, listening intently, but only the whisper of the wind through the trees filled the silence. My heart raced, a primal instinct urging me to turn back, but I pressed on. Suddenly, I heard a splash behind me, a sound that didn't belong. I turned, scanning the area, and there it was, a glint of something large, hidden among the trees. It looked like a massive wolf, its fur dark as midnight, blending perfectly with the shadows. My breath caught in my throat as I instinctively backed away. I thought I was imagining things, but the creature seemed to be watching me, its eyes glowing faintly, reflecting the little light that filtered through the branches. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized this wasn't just any wolf. This was something otherworldly, something wrong. I stood frozen, the weight of its gaze anchoring me in place. It shifted slightly, muscles rippling under its fur, as if considering its next move. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, adrenaline propelling me forward as I dashed deeper into the forest. Branches snagged at my clothes, and the underbrush tugged at my legs, but I couldn't stop. I could feel it behind me, the heavy thud of paws pounding the ground, echoing my heartbeat. I glanced back to see the creature weaving through the trees with an unnatural grace. Its eyes locked onto me with an intensity that sent chills spiraling through my body. In my haste, I stumbled over a root, falling hard to the ground. Pain shot through my knee, but I pushed myself back up, desperate to escape. I took off again, my breath ragged, the forest closing in around me. I had no idea where I was going. All I knew was that I had to get away. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows that distorted the world around me. I could no longer hear the sounds of wildlife. It was as if the forest had fallen silent in anticipation of the hunt. I was utterly alone. As darkness crept in, I finally spotted a clearing ahead. I surged forward, hoping it would provide some refuge. But when I stepped into the open space, my heart sank. There was nothing but an expanse of tangled undergrowth and a shallow stream winding its way through the brush. I was cornered. I glanced back, my chest tightening with fear. The creature emerged from the trees, its form larger than I had imagined, silhouetted against the fading light. It paused at the edge of the clearing, its gaze fixed on me. I was trapped, a sense of dread washing over me. It moved forward, slow and deliberate, almost like it was toying with me. As it stepped into the light, I could see its features clearly. Long, thin limbs, massive claws, and a snout that twisted into a grin too wide for any animal. The wolf stood there, its breath steaming in the cool air, and I felt an overwhelming urge to scream, but the sound lodged in my throat. I stumbled backward, feeling the cold water of the stream at my feet. Desperate, I turned and jumped in, the shock of the icy water jolting me awake. I splashed to the other side, scrambling up the bank as fast as I could, my pulse roaring in my ears. But the creature didn't follow. Instead, it lingered at the edge of the clearing, head tilted as if contemplating my next move. I couldn't understand why it wasn't attacking. The fear became almost unbearable. I felt like a mouse caught in the gaze of a cat, waiting for the moment it would pounce. With no time to waste, I sprinted into the thicket on the other side of the stream, branches clawing at my skin, thorns tearing at my clothes. I needed to find my way back. I needed to escape. But the further I ran, the more disoriented I became. It felt as if the forest itself was shifting, closing ranks around me, leading me deeper into its heart. The dim light of my phone was almost gone, the screen flickering like a dying star. I cursed myself for ignoring that low battery warning. This was no time for a dead phone. Then, I heard it again, the sound of water. I pushed through the thick underbrush, following the sound in hopes of finding the brook I had heard earlier. It wasn't long before I found it, the water shimmering faintly under the moonlight. I knelt to drink, splashing my face with the cool liquid, trying to calm my racing heart. But the moment I stood up, I felt it again, the weight of unseen eyes on me. I spun around, scanning the darkness, but there was nothing. Just the trees, looming silently, their branches whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. That's when I saw it again. A flicker of movement among the trees, and there were those eyes, glowing and watching. The wolf creature was stalking me, its body hidden behind a massive trunk, waiting for the right moment to strike. I stumbled backward, terror paralyzing me as it stepped into the light. It was closer now, closer than ever, and in the moonlight, its fur glistened, revealing patches of gray and silver, like smoke rising from a dying fire. It moved with a fluid grace, and for a moment I thought I saw something almost human in its gaze, a spark of intelligence, perhaps even malice. I turned and ran again, not caring where I was going, just needing to escape this nightmare. I pushed through the underbrush, the branches clawing at me, drawing blood, but I couldn't stop. The only thing that mattered was getting away. I stumbled into another clearing, breathless, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I stopped dead. The creature was there, standing in the middle of the clearing, blocking my path. This time, there was no hesitation in its movements. It lunged forward, a blur of fur and teeth. I ducked just in time, the rush of air as it passed so close I felt its heat. It turned quickly, its claws raking across the ground, and I felt a surge of adrenaline as I darted to the side. I had to think, had to find a way out. My eyes darted around, searching for something, anything that could help. That's when I spotted a massive oak tree, its gnarled roots protruding from the earth like fingers grasping for purchase. I sprinted towards it, adrenaline fueling my movements, and I ducked behind the trunk just as the wolf lunged again. I pressed my back against the rough bark, trying to steady my breath, praying it wouldn't find me. But the wolf was relentless, prowling around the tree, its eyes scanning for any sign of movement. I held my breath, waiting, heart hammering against my ribs. Suddenly, it stopped, sniffing the air, as if it sensed my fear. I could hear the low growl rumbling deep in its throat, and then it turned, sprinting off into the underbrush. Confused, I waited for a moment before cautiously peeking around the tree. It was gone. I felt a mix of relief and dread. The fear still clung to me, and I knew it wouldn't be long before it returned. I couldn't linger here. I had to move. I darted away from the oak tree, my senses on high alert, listening for any signs of the creature. As I moved through the forest, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs made me jump. I had no idea where I was going, but I needed to put distance between myself and that thing. I kept my head low and pushed through the underbrush, ignoring the branches that whipped against my skin. The darkness was almost complete now, the moon shrouded by clouds, leaving me in near pitch blackness. I stumbled and fell several times, scraping my hands and knees, but I forced myself to get back up. I felt like a prey animal, frantically searching for an escape route. I came across a narrow path and instinctively followed it, hoping it would lead to a way out. But as I walked, I realized the atmosphere had changed. The air felt heavy, charged with an electric tension that made my skin crawl. The forest was still, unnaturally so, as if it were holding its breath, waiting. Then I heard it again, the low growl reverberating through the stillness. My blood ran cold. I picked up my pace, adrenaline coursing through me. I had to find safety. I had to escape this nightmare. The path opened up into another clearing, and to my horror, I saw that I had come full circle. The massive oak tree stood ominously in front of me, silhouetted against the dim light. I felt a surge of despair as I realized the creature had been leading me in circles, toying with me. In that moment, I spotted something glinting in the moonlight. My phone, abandoned in the chaos of my escape. I lunged for it, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. It was almost dead, the screen flickering dangerously low, but I had to try to use it. Maybe I could find a signal, a way to call for help. As I struggled to turn it on, I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy paws padding softly across the ground behind me. I spun around, and there it was, the wolf creature, emerging from the shadows, its eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a chill through my core. I pressed the power button again, desperation mounting. Please, please work, I muttered to myself. Just as the screen lit up, the wolf lunged forward and I screamed, scrambling backward to avoid its snapping jaws. In a panic, I pointed my phone at the creature, the screen illuminating its monstrous face. I was desperate for any means of defense, and the light momentarily blinded it, causing it to recoil. I seized the opportunity to dart to the side, my heart racing. "Where are you?" I cried into the phone, praying for a miracle. But there was nothing. No service, no connection. I felt the weight of despair crashing down on me as I turned to face the wolf again. It stood at the edge of the clearing, watching, as if savoring my fear. It paced slowly, its massive body moving with an unsettling grace, its gaze never leaving mine. I felt the primal urge to run, but my legs felt heavy, paralyzed by terror. Then I remembered the stories I had read about the forest. Tales of strange creatures that roamed these woods, of lost hikers never seen again. I could feel the truth of those stories pressing in on me, the weight of the woods suffocating. I was a part of their dark legend now, a pawn in whatever game this creature was playing. As I backed away, the creature seemed to sense my fear and took a step forward. My breath hitched in my throat as I realized it was circling me, stalking me like a predator would its prey. I searched for an escape, but the forest felt like a trap closing in around me. With my heart pounding, I remembered the stream. I had to get to the water. It could be my only chance to throw it off my trail. I turned and ran, not daring to look back as I burst through the underbrush and into the dark, familiar space by the stream. The moon was obscured again, the darkness thickening, and I felt my way along the rocky bank, my breath ragged. I crouched low, pressing myself against the cold earth, hoping the water would conceal my presence. I could hear the sound of the creature moving through the trees, growing closer, and I held my breath, praying it would lose my scent. But as the growls faded and the silence returned, I felt a creeping doubt. Was it truly gone, or was it simply waiting, watching? I dared to peek out from my hiding spot, and my heart sank. The wolf stood at the edge of the clearing once more, its head tilted as if it were considering its next move. I was losing hope, feeling the weight of despair settle on my shoulders. Just when I thought all was lost, I remembered the stories of the forest, the whispers of those who claimed to have escaped, the few who had survived. Focus, I told myself, trying to shake off the panic. I needed a plan, something to outsmart the creature. I recalled that the wolf was toying with me, showing me its strength and power, but maybe it wasn't invincible. With my phone still clutched in my hand, I turned on the flashlight feature and aimed it directly at the creature. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating its massive form. For a moment, it hesitated, the light reflecting in its eyes. I seized the moment and backed away slowly, still shining the light on it. I felt like a desperate magician trying to distract the beast. But as I moved, the creature began to growl again, low and deep, a sound that echoed in the stillness of the forest. Then, just as I was about to lose hope, I saw it, a faint outline of a path leading away from the clearing. It looked overgrown and unused, but it was my only chance. I took a deep breath and bolted, keeping the light trained on the creature. It lunged after me, but I didn't look back. I raced down the path, branches tearing at my clothes, the sound of its growls echoing in my ears. The forest felt alive, the trees seeming to shift and sway as if they were conspiring against me. As I ran, I felt a surge of energy, a determination to escape this living nightmare. The path twisted and turned, but I pushed through, driven by sheer will. I could hear the wolf gaining on me, but I refused to give up. Then, I burst out of the trees and onto a gravel road. I didn't stop. I kept running, sprinting toward the distant lights of a town. I could hardly believe I was free, the oppressive weight of the forest falling away behind me. But as I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. I glanced back, but there was nothing there, just the stillness of the night. Yet, deep in my gut, I knew the forest had not let me go entirely. When I reached the town, breathless and trembling, I collapsed onto a bench in front of a diner. I was alive, but the feeling of dread lingered. I pulled out my phone, the battery finally dead, and looked around, feeling the weight of what I had witnessed. I spent the night in the diner, recounting my story to the concerned patrons and staff. They listened, wide-eyed, exchanging glances filled with disbelief. Some dismissed it as a tall tale, while others nodded knowingly, murmuring about the old legends of the cedarwood forest. As I prepared to leave in the morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within me. The woods had taken a part of me, a piece I could never reclaim. The thrill of adventure was replaced by a haunting sense of dread. Driving away, I glanced back at the forest, its dark outline looming in the rearview mirror. I felt a question lingering in the air, a whisper of doubt. Had I truly escaped, or had I merely become another chapter in its twisted lore? The answer danced just out of reach, like shadows playing tricks in the twilight. And as I drove on, I couldn't help but wonder if the wolf was still watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again, lurking just beyond the edge of my memory.